If you saw a recent PoE2 reveal, you're probably feeling a bit overwhelmed. I know I certainly am. So I'm going to make a series of videos breaking down things from the reveal into more bite-sized pieces. The first video is going to start with classes, how to ascend, and ascendancies. Then maybe I'll sprinkle in a few of my own thoughts and opinions, especially on the Ascendancy section. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, do be sure to get subscribed, and also ring that notification bell to see all the new uploads. Now, for the early access in Path of Exile 2, 6 base classes have been confirmed: the Monk, Warrior, Ranger, Mercenary, and Witch, each of which will have 2 Ascendancies. This is only a mere fraction of the eventual 12 classes and 36 Ascendancies that will be available from the game's full release. Think of your class in PoE2 as a foundation upon which you build your character, and your Ascendancy is an extension of that, allowing for new archetypes and more power. So, with all of that said, let's get into things, starting with the Monk, a peerless martial artist who leverages his momentum to move from pack to pack while swiftly dispatching enemies. The Monk wields a quarterstaff and uses skills associated with lightning, wind, and ice. He also has a variety of synergistic ways to combine the different skills and elements available to him. For example, some skills may generate you power charges, which you can then spend to unleash a more powerful version of a different skill. Or you could drop a Tempest spell and then strike it to elemental damage, increasing its output by causing it to deal elemental damage in addition to its normal strikes. Or you could just use a skill that empowers your staff and maybe causes you to fill the screen with a bunch of winged projectiles. Now I have to say, the Monk looks really fun to play due to the way he combines damage and mobility, but it also looks like he could be a bit lacking on defenses, especially if you aren't able to freeze your enemies. So when you're playing a Monk, don't dash into a situation that you don't have a plan to get yourself out of. Or if you do, maybe expect that you could end up going low and have a life flask ready. On the other hand, if you like melee but you want to be a little bit beefier, consider playing the Warrior. He uses maces to unleash massive slams that send aftershocks through his foes. And he's capable of using a shield which provides extra defenses. While you have your shield raised, you block all damage, at least for so long as your stagger meter lasts. And many shield skills do also block while they're active. While slams are slower, Path of Exile has a very dynamic movement system. This means you can mid-attack, redirect where you're aiming, or dodge roll to cancel out of an attack if the animation is a little too long and you're worried you're going to get hit. Now the Warrior also has access to a variety of auxiliary skills. These could be things like War Cries, which are often used to empower slams and unleash complete devastation on unsuspecting foes. Or you could summon totems, because after all, why kill every enemy yourself when you could have a totem do some of it for you? In fact, you could even reserve some of your spirit to use special totems that use your slam skills. So in short, if you want to get into an enemy's face, hit hard, or bash them from behind cover, well, then the Warrior is going to be your best bet. But you know what, maybe melee isn't for you, and fair enough, maybe the range would be more of your taste. She wields a bow and deals damage from a distance while remaining highly mobile. Because she can attack while moving, and because she uses a wide variety of skills covering physical, cold, lightning, and poison, the Ranger has a particularly flexible playstyle. The lightning and poison skills look like they're very effective for dealing damage over a wide area, and also inflicting debilitating effects like slows or crippling electrocution to take enemies out of a fight entirely. Though I guess you could also freeze them solid while also retreating with a quick backstep or vaulting over them if that's really what you need. In short, the Ranger's main defense is simply being in a place where the enemies can't attack her anyway. Also, because she can attack while moving, she excels at clearing large groups of foes while quickly moving from pack to pack to pack. If you're looking for a mapper build you want to go fast, then I strongly recommend checking out the Ranger. On the other hand, the Mercenary is inspired by FPS games, and he uses a wide variety of guns. Oh sorry, I forgot, the Templar Commission ruled we can't say that word anymore. He uses a wide variety of crossbows and grenades that just happen to resemble things like a sniper rifle, a shotgun, or an assault rifle. But I assure you, they are all crossbows and therefore Templar approved. And of course, you can take things to the next level by mixing in various types of elemental ammunitions straight off the thaumaturgical black market. Use these to shred an enemy's armor, create walls of ice, or just light stuff on fire because watching the world burn is pretty darn fun. Last up, like I said before, the Mercenary uses grenades, and these make things explode, which objectively make them some of the best skills to use. In addition to causing explosions, they can inflict debuffs and damage over time. Luckily, most of those debuffs and damage over time also happen to be toxic chemicals, which are highly explosive. So combine grenades with your other crossbow skills to deliver a 1-2 punch and take out the entire crowd. If you're down for some flexible thinking and want to play a class that has an answer for every situation, then the Mercenary is very much for you. But hey, maybe you want something a little more relaxed. You just want to chill? Well, play a Minion Witch. Minions are a special type of persistent ally in Path of Exile 2. Reserve your spirit to summon permanent minions. And don't worry, if they die, they'll just resummon automatically after a short duration. Then watch them kill your foes for you. Now, while they are technically passive, permanent minions also have an active skill which you can use to do game-breaking things like turning your other minions into living bombs. Like I said, explosions are the best. If you want even more of a minion army, then you'll have to use some corpse skills. These consume the corpses of your enemies to grant you some temporary minions. But well, they're temporary. They only last so long, so you'll need to ensure that you have a fresh supply of corpses by finding more enemies and then turning them into suitable materials. That said, minions aren't for everyone, and Witch has a variety of other options for enjoyers of the occult and the profane. You can literally curse your enemies to death, use chaos spells to melt through their health, or focus on bone skills that create big spikes of damage. I suspect the Witch is going to be a pretty beginner-friendly class, and hey, if you don't like the playstyle, well, she's got plenty of other options. And last but not least, you have the Sorceress, who blends the elements, set foes on fire, freeze them solid, or shock them to increase your damage output. One thing that's particular about the Sorceress is there are a lot of synergies between the different elemental skills, strictly encouraging you to mix them rather than just going with all fire skills because you're a fire mage. I mean, you can if you want, but isn't it cooler to shoot your sparks through your flame wall so they get the fire debuff rather than shooting your fireballs through the flame wall? Yeah, they both get the damage buff, but the sparks just look so much cooler while doing it. Now, the Sorceress is another ranged character, like the Ranger and the Mercenary, but she doesn't really have the Mercenary's flexibility, and she doesn't really have the Ranger's mobility. What she does have is some very powerful, hard-hitting skills. So, consider freezing an enemy to prevent them from interrupting you before you unleash some of her biggest nukes. Now, as one last note, so far in this video, I've talked about the classes based on their recommended archetypes and the skills that you get during the early game. But this does not mean that you have to use elemental spells of a Sorceress. This doesn't mean you only have to use occult spells on a Witch. In fact, if you want to be a mercenary wielding a 200 mace, have at it. Planning to use elemental spells on your Ranger? Sounds great. Gonna go warrior and summon a minion army? Well, just because you can doesn't mean you should. If you're completely new to Path of Exile and just want an easy path to follow, stick to the recommended skills. But as you grow more comfortable and as you approach the endgame, maybe go down to the bottom of the skills option, check the show all box, and do a little experimentation. Now, if you want to further customize your character, you're going to need to ascend, and this is done by completing the Trials of Ascension. For the early access, there's going to be 2 trials available, the Trial of the Sekimas and the Trial of the Chaos God. You can complete either one of them to ascend, or both if you prefer. So let's get into a little bit about the Trials of Ascension and how they function. First up, the Trials of the Sekimas, where you fight through a series of challenge rooms. Now what sets this apart from all the other activities within Path of Exile is your health bar is kind of sort of replaced with a resource called Honor. You still have health, but you're unlikely to die from damage. More likely, you're going to fail the run from losing all your honor. So you need to do your best to avoid damage as you complete each room. Luckily, the enemies that appear within the Trial of the Sekimas tend to have very telegraphed attacks to enable this. But you'll need to defeat a lot of foes, avoid traps, and finally, defeat the boss of the floor to access the Trial of Ascension. On the other hand, if that sounds too difficult, maybe consider the Trial of the Chaos God, which first appears in Act 3. You'll fight your way through a gauntlet of challenges set by the Trial Master. With each room, you're offered both a reward and a tribulation. Choose these debuffs carefully, as the first one might not feel very impactful, but they add up over the course of a run, and after a few rooms, they could become a serious threat. Within the room, you'll need to do a variety of activities. Kill enemies, survive for a certain amount of time, or escort a little object as if you're playing an Overwatch map. After completing 3 rooms, you're confronted with a dangerous boss. Defeat it to earn some rewards and access the Altar of Ascension. Now currently, the 3rd trial is unknown. But if you allow me to put on my tinfoil hat for a moment, GGG did say it's tied to one of the game's major factions, and we pretty recently had a PoE1 League mechanic that sounded awfully familiar: Trial of the Ancestors. Could a revamped version of this, a trial tied to a major PoE faction, the Karui, be that lost trial coming for PoE 2's full release? If so, I suspect it's going to show up at some point in Act 4, which, based on what we've seen in previous ExileCon reveals, has a lot of stuff tied to both the Karui and the Kalgurans, kind of like how the Karui and the Kalgurans trade around the settlement of Westmarch, which was a pivotal point in the Settlers of Kalgur League. But who knows, maybe I'm totally wrong, and feel free to post your speculation down in the comments below. Now next up, I'm going to go through each of the Ascendancies, play the clip from GGG talking about some of the features, broken down by class, and then give a few of my own thoughts. It's pretty hard to make build recommendations. I haven't played PoE 2 at all, and we just know so little that it's hard to say what's going to be good in the endgame. So instead, I'm going to talk about general concepts and what attracts me to each of the classes, or maybe what doesn't attract me to some of the classes.
As a sorceress, you could become a Stormweaver, a master of the elements. Tempest Caller causes elemental storms to be summoned each time you do a critical hit with a spell. With Strike twice, you can stack 2 copies of Shock for more damage, and going deeper into the tree, you can make all your damage types apply Shock. Make a Shock build from any skill. Alternatively, you could become a Chronomancer and command time itself. She literally has the ability to stop time with Time Freeze. Not only that, but she has many other time manipulation abilities. Using Temporal Rift, she can teleport back to a previous location, resetting her life and mana back to what it was. Or with Time Snap, she can reset all her cooldowns and cast all her spells again.
Alright, so Sorceress looks pretty cool. Stormweaver reminds me a lot of Path of Exile 1's Elementalist, whereas Chronomancer looks totally insane. Stop time, rewind to heal yourself, reset your cooldowns. I mean, that looks game-breaking if done correctly. So I suspect this means that Stormweaver is going to be a very good beginner-friendly pick. The shock amplification means your damage should feel really good, especially throughout the campaign and early endgame. And it also looks like it's pretty hard to mess up, especially if all damage can shock. On the other hand, I don't think Chronomancer is going to be very beginner-friendly, but we are going to see people do totally insane things, break bosses. I don't know, maybe the first kill of the Uber Pinnacle boss is going to be someone playing a Chronomancer who got hit by 0 of the mechanics because they kept hitting their buttons right. I also think we're going to see a lot of clips of streamers dying on Chronomancer because they think they're a bit more clever than they actually are. And I'm also really tempted to try Chronomancer because it looks super cool, and I don't think I'm actually good enough at the game to play it to its full potential.
On the Warrior, you can choose between the Warbringer or the Titan. The Warbringer channels the might of his ancestors to gain tremendous power. Using Answered Call, you can summon ancestral spirits linked to each of your totems. With Jade Heritage, you can encase your body in a protective layer that absorbs all damage until it breaks. Warcaller's Bellow allows you to explode the corpses of your enemies. And with Great Wolf's Howl, you can ignore the cooldowns of your war cries. Let all that anger out. The Titan class is all about hitting big. With Earthbreaker, every slam is a chance to create an aftershock. With Crushing Impacts, every hit becomes a crushing blow, which will allow you to stun your enemies with ease. With Surprising Strength, you can take advantage of stunned enemies to deal 40% more damage.
For the Warrior, you have Warbringer, who has some nice defensive options with the Jade Encasement, and being able to summon spirits from totems should add a nice bit of clear. It kind of reminds me of Earthbreaker Chieftain builds from PoE 1, but maybe finally actually good. This is something else that I think is going to be a very beginner-friendly recommendation, easy to play, solid damage, and a lot of extra reach to help cover for your mistakes. Titan, on the other hand, is about hitting big and hitting hard, somewhat like a Berserker archetype in other games. But instead of getting really mad to hit really fast, he just hits hard, stuns the enemy, and then hits them even harder because he likes punching things when they're down. Now this could lead to some feelings of win more, where you roll over easier bosses, but struggle when you can't stay in the fight long enough to CC stuff. But on the other hand, it could feel really satisfying to CC a boss and during that stagger just completely obliterate their health bar.
As a ranger, you might choose to be a Deadeye, an expert markswoman who can take down foes with style. With endless munitions, every attack gains an extra projectile. With Gathering Winds, she gains a small increase to movement speed with every attack. But be careful, she loses them when getting hit. With eagle eyes, she will never miss, allowing you to stop wasting all those passive points on accuracy. Alternatively, you could become a Pathfinder, the master of flasks and poison. She can choose from one of several throwable concoctions, allowing her to spend her flask charges to throw explosive bottles that deal various types of damage. A bleeding concoction will make your enemies bleed, while a fulminating one can shock your enemies, allowing you to do extra damage. Contagious contamination allows her to spread poisons between her foes, while overwhelming toxicity doubles the number of stacks they can be infected by. Running assault allows her to move much more quickly while firing, while relentless pursuit makes her totally immune to being slowed by enemies.
On the other hand, I feel like the Ranger has some of the most boring Ascendancy options in PoE 2. Mostly because they're kind of just PoE 1 Ascendancies, and PoE 2 Ascendancy design is really cool and feels super different. Sure, you have Deadeye, you get projectiles, speed, and you don't need accuracy on gear anymore, which is probably going to be more impactful than it sounds, as I do think affixes on gear in PoE 2 are going to be significantly more valuable than affixes on gear in PoE 1. And both skills also look really good, so maybe they don't need the interesting mechanics. For me personally, Deadeye's kind of a tough sell right now, but I'm also pretty sure it's going to be very popular because people love bows and they love going fast. Pathfinder, on the other hand, a little bit harder to parse. Her poison prolif and doubling poisons on an enemy looks very strong. But I'm curious how the rest of her toolkit comes together. Being able to attack faster while moving, resisting enemy movement speed penalties, that's all really good quality of life, it's going to feel great to play. But the concoction stuff, I'm pretty skeptical. Maybe it's strong enough to be its own build, but if it's not, I don't know how many people are going to be throwing concoctions to keep stuff up in the middle of a boss fight.
The Witch can ascend into the Infernalist or the Blood Mage. As an Infernalist, she can summon a loyal Hellhound companion. The Hellhound sets enemies on fire, as well as taking a percentage of the damage if the Infernalist gets hit. With Pyromantic Pact, you can turn your mana into Infernal Flame. As you cast more spells, the flame builds up, and if it overflows, you'll take damage. Using Bringer of Flame, you'll want to make sure you keep the flames topped up. While your Infernal Flame is above 30%, all damage from you and your minions will ignite enemies. She can also transform into a literal demon. While in demon form, she takes an increasing amount of damage, but her cast speed and damage increase rapidly as well. So if you're planning on transforming into a demon, make sure you stack a lot of life recovery. She can also become a Blood Mage, a master of life and energy. All Blood Mages must pay the price of making skills cost life as well as mana, but in exchange, every monster they kill will drop life remnants, which allow them to quickly gain back that life. With Crimson Power, she can gain large amounts of extra life, and with Vitality Siphon, she can use her spells to leech life back as well. Once you've got a significant amount of life, you can use Gore Spike to make your critical hits deal incredible amounts of damage.
Then you have the Witch. Infernalist looks really interesting, and in particular, I'm looking forward to Demon form. Yes, taking the increased damage means eventually you're going to die if you don't have good recovery, but you also deal more damage, aka the best defense is getting more leech and just killing all the enemies before they ever get to hit you. I guess the other nodes are kind of okay too. Alright, if you want to be a tanky caster and hide behind a wall of minions, you want a beginner friendly build. Yeah, I think the Hellhound looks great and Infernalist is going to be very strong. But personally, I'm actually a little bit more interested in the Blood Mage, because it reminds me of the Breaker of Oath's Wildwood Ascendancy from PoE 1. Now on its own, I don't really know what to make of it. The leech is pretty cool, and extra health is nice, and damage from health is cool. But I'm hoping this is part of a robust health or Blood Mage archetype that includes a bunch of unique items which allow you to further scale your damage. Also, if there's any way to make that leech instant, I am 100% sold.
A monk who is in tune with the elements might become an Invoker. With Elemental Expression, the Invoker will create waves of elemental power each time he does a critical strike. With Faith as a choice, you gain the ability to meditate, allowing you to double your energy shield. Choose between I am the Blizzard or I am the Thunder to specialize in cold or lightning. And I Shall Rage will allow you to turn into an unbound avatar. Each time you apply a status ailment to an enemy, you gain Unbound Fury. When you have enough, transform into an avatar to deal way more damage and inflict even more elemental ailments. Some monks choose to reach into the darkness instead. The Acolyte of Chayula can exchange their mastery of spirit for darkness, a resource that can be utilized to both absorb and deal damage. The Shroud of Darkness will protect you from all damage incoming, but if you take Grasp of the Void, you will deal extra chaos damage from all the darkness you have. Their Dark Pact offers greatly increased resistances to chaos damage and can allow their mana leech to not only happen instantly, but apply to their energy shield as well. Another node you can take is Waking Dream, which allows you to see into the domain of the Breach Demons. There you will see the Flames of Chayula that can be taken to gain life, mana, and damage.
Which, speaking of, we have the Monk. Now first, there's the Invoker, which very much reminds me of Stormweaver. A solid choice. Being able to double your ES if you get to dip out of combat feels really, really nice for giving you some extra defenses, especially early. And the elemental stuff looks solid. Again, I think Invoker's going to be a very good beginner-friendly Ascendancy. But what really intrigues me is the Acolyte of Chayula, because he has instant leech for his mana that seems to also apply to Energy Shield. And if I've learned anything from my over decade of PoE experience, it's anytime instant leech gets involved, something is just game-breaking there. Now, converting Spirit to Darkness, also really interesting. This could mean you don't get as many meta skills, so less buffs, less auras. At a baseline, you're weaker. But also, you could be really, really tanky, and maybe you don't need those buffs. Say you don't need defensive auras, because your darkness is that defensive aura effect. Plus, if you're making an ES build, having extra Chaos Res should help quite a bit. I'm getting strong PoE1 Trickster vibes here.
The Mercenary has a job to do, but which job suits you? You might choose to become a Witch Hunter. Obsessive Rituals will give you a sorcery ward, allowing you to defend yourself against elemental hits in exchange for less defense against attacks. With Zealous Inquisition, your enemies have a 10% chance to explode on death. The chance is doubled against demons and undead. With Judge, Jury, and Executioner, your initial hit against enemies can deal up to 30% of their life and damage, if you're lucky. This is great for hunting powerful bosses. And with Witchbane, you can break your enemy's concentration, preventing them from casting spells as often as they would usually do. You could also choose to become a Gemling Legionnaire, enhancing your abilities by embedding gems directly in your flesh. Integrated Efficiency will give you extra skill slots. Thermatological Infusion gives you extra maximum resistances as you socket more and more support gems. Adaptive Capability allows you to use any color of gem without worrying about attributes, while Crystalline Potential adds extra quality bonuses to every gem socketed into your character.
First up, Witch Hunter, which stands out to me in particular for its ability to do support things. Disrupting boss patterns is very powerful. Even if it's only spells, so a boss might use a mix of attacks and spells, disrupting those spells could mean that you get to stun them and the boss simply doesn't get to cast that spell again before they die. Also, Decimating Strike looks very, very fun. And I would assume, if you're in a full party and the boss has a lot more health, Decimating Strike still takes off a percent of a boss's health, plus you get to explode enemies. And like I've said several times now, explosions are fun. If you're wondering, is 10 going to stop saying explosions are fun? No. Why would I stop saying that? That's half of why you're here. But Witch Hunter isn't really calling to me. What is the Gemling Legionnaire, because this is the perfect class for experimentation. You get extra skill slots, which probably means more room for meta gems. You know, extra defenses. And, speaking of, you get even more max res based on your supports. So you're probably going to want to socket a mix of strength, dexterity, and intelligence supports to get a little bit of all the max resistances. At least assuming you don't find a unique item that converts one damage type over to another, which I don't know how common that is or how viable it's going to be. Also, extra quality on skills, well, I'm gonna guess skills have some pretty cool quality effects, so that's really strong as well. I really like this, and I also suspect this is the perfect character to make full use of a weapon swap system, because if you have all those gems, you might be able to use two compatible but very different weapons, like say using a projectile melee attack on a mace and combining it with a crossbow. And so, those are the classes and ascendancies available for the early access in Path of Exile 2, along with some of my thoughts. Now, if you want to know more, I've got a full guide over at Maxwell GG, which you can peruse. It has some speculation on all of the 12 classes available in Path of Exile 2, and as we get more information, I'm going to be updating it in the future. But that leaves just one question. What class or ascendancy are you planning to start in PoE 2? For me personally, I'm looking at Acolyte of Chayula, Gemling Legionnaire, or Chronomancer. They all look great, though if I play Chronomancer, I'm probably going to die a lot to misusing the reverse time. That said, the only way for you to know for sure is to get subscribed and ring that notification bell, and then come back for when I inevitably make a video about what I'm league starting, and then inevitably start something that is not the thing I picked in my video because I'm really indecisive about this stuff. Oh, and hey, you made it to the end of the video, so maybe leave a like while you're down there. Now, normally this is where I'd recommend something else to watch, and I don't have anything else to watch yet. So instead, I recommend that you look around, check out the other Maxwell creators, see what they've got, because I'm sure they're going to be giving some of their thoughts on the absolutely massive Period 2 announcement as well. So with that, thank you for watching to the end, I'm glad you've enjoyed, and now I need to get back into the video editing minds and start working on the next video in this breakdown series.